Thank you very much, Sri Vasudev and Srimati Vani. I'm grateful to you for inviting me again for another talk, but this time in English. Although either Sanskrit or Kannada are the best suited for Vedantic talks, uh, I wouldn't mind speaking in English, but I may be using several technical words in Sanskrit itself, assuming some background of Vedanta on the part of the viewers today. I will start the talk today by remembering Bhagavan and the past masters of Vedanta by a prayer. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yatkripatamaham vande paramanandamadhavam Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutrabhashya Kritav Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Namami Gaudapadancha Shankaram Sri Sureshwaram Swaminam Satchidanandam Indram Tam Jnana Rupinam. Again, a warm welcome to all the viewers. I have chosen the topic Jivas and Ishvara in Vedanta. Any talk on Vedanta will generally include Brahman, Ishvara, Jiva, and Jagat, and their relationship. That is the content, more or less, of Vedanta. Now, we observe a world out there with a variety of objects and animate and inanimate beings, and its structure looks so complex. And people from time immemorial have thought about where from this Jagat would have come. What is the cause behind this world? Not only the scholars, thinkers in the Western world, but in the Eastern world also, several theories have been put forth. In India, there have been 6 Vaidika darshanas: Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Purvamimamsa, Uttaramimamsa. These are the 6 darshanas. They have their own way of understanding the creation. Uttaramimamsa is Vedanta. Apart from these Vaidika darshanas, there have been darshanas on the part of Jainas, Buddhists, Charvakas, who are materialists. And of course, in modern day, the physical scientists have also, for the last couple of 100 years, have researched to determine and fathom the depths of this universe. A number of innovations, investigations have been done, but the cause of this world has been elusive. It appears that the position of the empirical sciences today is that all the things in the universe can be explained solely by the physical causes. That the physical world forms what is called as a causal closure. and consciousness. It emerges out of brain processes. Now, this kind of theory, this is a theory which is mainly based on what we call as pratyaksha pramana and anumana pramana, direct perception and inference. Of course, enhancement of direct perception in the form of microscopes, telescopes, and others. And of course, for analysis, mathematics, computers, these have been used, and tremendous investigations have been done, and the outcome has been used by the technologists for the benefit of mankind in several ways. However, the cause of the world, it is continuing to be elusive. It's an opinion on my part that if scientists continue to have the scientific spirit, then they will keep everything tentative and open, and finally they will become Vedantins. That's a humble opinion of mine in this direction. Now, in this country, the rishis of the yore have made use of what is called as Shabda Pramana. That is the Vakya sentences in the Vedas as the basis for determining everything that is beyond our senses. What we see through our five senses, that corresponds to the material world or the physical world. But when we are talking about the cause of the world itself as such, then it is beyond the senses and is called Atindriya. Now, the position with the Vedantas, that is Vedanta, that is the culminating portion of the ideas in Vedas. Vedantas are nothing but a collection of Upanishads. By trying to understand the Upanishadic statements in the tradition, the revelations that are available in these Upanishads have been discussed in what are called as Brahma Sutras. And great masters like Shankaracharya have put forth their detailed commentaries to determine the purport of the Vedantic sentences. And the conclusion of the Vedantas is Sarvagam Hyetad Brahma Ayamatma Brahma. All that there is Brahman. This Atman, this self within the human body and other living beings also, is Brahman. That is to say, Brahman is the sole truth, one truth without a second. Ekameva Advitiyam. Now, taking the basis of an Upanishadic statement in the Taittiriya Upanishad, Yato va imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayanti abhisamvishanti tadvijijñāsasva tad brahmeti. That is, from where all these beings have taken their birth and by which particular entity the continuance or the sustentation of this world is taking place, and finally into which that entity or the principle, all these entities get dissolved, that has to be understood. That is Brahman. The words Brahman, Atman are synonymous. In English, it is consciousness or self, self of everybody, all beings, inert as well as living beings. Everywhere, what is the basic or the ultimate principle that has provided this support for the appearance of the world is this consciousness, and that is the consciousness in us, the self, so-called self, or Atman, also called as Pratyagatman. There are other words also for this, Sakshi and Ishvara. I will slightly elaborate on this Ishvara a little later. In the Brahma Sutras, Shankaracharya has given the commentary on one of the sutras. The sutra is Janmadhyasya Yataha. It's a pithy, concise statement. That is, from where the birth and others have taken place, that one, that is Brahman, that is the sutra. For that, Shankaracharya elaborates that this particular world, it consists of names and forms. Instead of beings, living beings and like that, the words used are names and forms which are differentiated. That is, we see objects as names and forms. Every object has a form and a name, and it includes several agents of action and enjoyers. Kartru, Bhoktru. This essentially talks of the human beings. They are kartris, they are agents of action. Bhoktris, they enjoy the fruits of their action. And Shankaracharya further elaborates that the world is Pratiniyata Desha Kala Nimitta Kriya Phalashraya. That is, it has got it appears to have a very well regulated actions and their fruits with space, time, causation, and others. With this, there seems to be a sort of a regularity and a proper structure that the world has. That is this world. And this is unimaginable even in the mind. Manasapi achintya rupasya. Even in the mind, you cannot imagine how complex this world is. And of such a world, the birth, sustenance, and dissolution, this must be taking place by one cause, and that cause has to be omnipotent and omniscient. That is, it must be Sarvagya and Sarvashakta. That is the position of Vedanta. So Brahman in Vedanta is Sarvagya and Sarvashakta. Now, it is consciousness I mentioned. Now, what exists in the created world, space, time, causation, animate, inanimate objects, their properties, and so on, they are all visible in the world. And in the cause that Brahman is, or consciousness is, these things will be absent. Because the whole idea is to determine the existence of these beings and their properties and all the objects in the world. So if Brahman is told as the cause of such a world, these objects, their properties, and the causation, that is cause and effect, this kind of relation, etc., will have to be absent in Brahman. Because if they are present in Brahman also, in the cause also, then the question has to continue from where, from those objects and those properties come into picture in Brahman. So the position is Brahman is consciousness is the ultimate. And from that Brahman, which is devoid of any qualities, any features, without space, without time, without any sort of causation, and a homogeneous one, no parts, never born, such is the entity which is called Brahman or consciousness. From such an entity, the world emerges. Now it is mind-boggling as to think how such an entity may exist without that. But as one pursues Vedanta, it will come into the experience within the intellect. A conviction comes as to the correctness of this Vedantic position. Now there are statements to so-called define or talk about this Brahman. For example, apurvam anaparam anantaram abhahyam. Brahman has no cause. Brahman has no effect, that it does not produce anything out of it. And aparam, anantaram abhahyam. That is, it has nothing inside it. It has nothing outside it. Similarly, ashabdam asparsham arupam avyayam. It has no sound. It has no touch. The five senses, what we are calling, those entities do not exist in Brahman. Asthula manano ahraswa madirgham, and so on. It is not big. It is not small. It is not short. It is not long, and so on. Sabhahyabhyantaro hyajaha. It doesn't have anything outside it. It doesn't have anything inside it, and so on. When you see the way in which Brahman has been explained, there can be only one such Brahman consciousness, and if the world is said to be created by this entity Brahman, then that world has to be a mere appearance in Brahman. It cannot be a creation in the general sense in which we use it in the empirical world. That is, from a father, a child is born. From a cow, a calf is born. And those two appear as separate two different objects. In that way, it is not the way in which it is told this creation of the world. The world is an appearance in Brahman. And in Brahman, there is no any activity or objects that are found in the world. That means to say, Brahman remains totally unaffected by the affairs of the world. It is the base. You can take the example of an ocean. Ocean is a big mass of water, and consider the waves in it. Now, if the ocean is water, the waves are not affecting, that if the waves rise and then fall, nothing happens to the water. In that particular sense, way, one has to understand that what goes on in the world does not affect Brahman in whatever way. Then there is another important definition for Brahman: Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. This is a Taittiriya Upanishad sentence. Brahman is Satyam. Satyam means one that does not change its form. That is, if a particular entity is known to be of some form, and if it never changes that form, then that is said to be Satyam. And any object that we see in the world, we know that it is subject to change. Therefore, Brahman will be the only entity which will be appropriate to call Satyam. Then Jnanam means Brahman is not inert. It is Chaitanya, Chaitanya Swarupa. It is consciousness. That is Jnanam. Anantam means it is infinite. It is infinite for the simple reason is that it is one without a second. When there is no second object, the concept of infinity does not come. In the empirical world, we see individual entities, and therefore there can be a concept of infinity, as in mathematics. But when there is only one object without it's not an object, Brahman is not an object, only one entity, Brahman, without a second, then it is naturally infinite. These three, Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma, clearly sets apart Brahman from anything, any other object or entity that we can conceive in our minds. It's set apart. It's totally, there is only one object, that is Brahman, for which this particular definition, Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma, suits. This is called as the intrinsic nature of Brahman. Can there be such a entity? I will give you a glimpse of this by examining these three states: waking state, dream state, and the deep sleep state. In the waking state, there is a world which appears very real to all of us. Now, when we go to dream, where is this waking world? It is possible that after we wake up from the dream, we see the same world, and someone else corroborates that when we were sleeping or dreaming, the world was there only. Someone else may say, but what is the idea from within the dream itself? We are there as a entity within the dream. That is, we have a dream body, and the dream world is there. However different it appears, and without regularity of any kind compared to the waking world, there is no second thought that the dream world appears to us as real only at that time. Then at that time, from the point of view or from this standpoint from within the dream, how do we take corroboration of a person who is not within that world, dream world? The corroboration is only from a person in the waking world, and we are talking about where is the waking world sitting within the dream. So naturally, the waking world, however real it appears to be is simply not there in our consciousness when we are in the dream state. Similarly, when we wake up, the dream world is nowhere. The same logic, but there is no doubt for anyone that I am the person who is in the waking state. I am the dreamer. There is no doubt about this to anyone. Therefore, this immediately allows the conclusion that the world is not a necessary part of me. Although I am considering myself as a part of this world, waking world, Vedanta has this idea that it's totally opposite. We are not an entity within the world, but the entire world is within me as consciousness. Our intrinsic nature is consciousness, and in that consciousness, the whole world, including our body, mind, senses, etc., is an appearance. But for some strange reason, in a very natural way, we tend to take our body as real, the world as real, and that we are just one puny little entity in this particular world. This is a paradox according to Vedanta. Then if we go to the deep sleep state, there is a much bigger story there. The deep sleep state means that we don't apprehend any object there. It's a total blankness in the deep sleep state. But can we say that we ourselves were not existing in the deep sleep state? This is not possible, because after we wake up from the deep sleep state, it is our own experience that I had a perfect sleep and I did not see any other object. Whose experience are we telling? Who is there in the deep sleep state to tell us that everything is like that? If there is someone to tell us, then we would have seen that entity within the deep sleep state. Therefore, by this we can conclude that in the deep sleep state, we are in our intrinsic form, namely pure consciousness, nothing else. So this is this viveka, or the analysis of the tri-states, is just to give a glimpse of an entity. Consciousness exists and it doesn't require a world, and it is not an object, another object like an object in the world. Now coming to Ishvara, Brahman only is called as Ishvara when the world is appearing to us. That is, in the waking state or in the dream state, there is a world that is appearing. Of course, since all our deliberations are confined to the waking state, we can confine ourselves to that state only and say that Brahman is Ishvara in relation to the appearance of the waking world. Vedanta says that Ishvara is the ruler or the governor on whom he is governing. He is Ishvara for who are the Ishitavyas, the entities who are being governed. That means it's all the other objects and living beings in the world. These are the ones which are being governed by Ishvara. This doesn't mean that Ishvara does some work. We already mentioned that Ishvara is Brahman only, consciousness, but that name is given because in relation to the world, Brahman is called as Ishvara and he has to govern. What is the meaning of this governance? This is nothing but the entire arrangement and the general rule or general way in which the world affairs takes place in a natural way, that vyavastha, that arrangement is due to him. And if you do some particular action, some particular karma, you'll have to reap the consequences of that and a fruit. That fruit, it is not known before doing that particular work. And what fruit has to come, it is not possible for us to dictate. Several times we can predict the result, but most of the time things happen without our clear understanding of the outcome of such a result. That is why Ishvara is called as the karma phala data. He is the person he is the entity who decides the fruits of actions of all the living beings. Of course, there is no time for elaborating on this aspect. Ishvara in relation to the world is said to be Sarvajna and Sarvashakta, and then he is the one who creates the world. And when the world is not there, the word that is used to describe that entity is Brahman. That is, in the deep sleep state, it is Brahman. In the waking state, it's the Ishvara who governs the world. That is the only difference. Since the whole world is actually a superimposition on consciousness, on Brahman. It is not a part of Brahman, but it's not apart from Brahman. Therefore, Ishvara is the name in relation to the world, and when the world does not appear, the word that is used is Brahman. Now in the Upanishads about creation, certain theories are put. Actually, since no creation is possible, it is only appearance in Brahman, appearance in consciousness that this world is. How does it appear? If it is necessary to give a sort of a procedure for people who think that the world is real only and it must have a cause, when for such people who are having a sort of a conviction that the world would have come out of something else, it is only to satisfy such people certain creation methods or prakriyas, or what is called as causation, is told in Upanishads. There is not much value for that, but only in the initial stages, the seekers of the self, such people will be able to convince themselves that the world is not apart from Brahman. It is only an appearance. It is only a superimposition on Brahman. What kind of superimposition? It is even like a snake on the rope. A rope in a semi-lighted area may appear as a snake for someone, but on close examination, it will be understood that it is rope only and there is no snake. So it is common knowledge that even when the rope was appearing as a snake, there was no snake. The rope had not become a snake. And on close examination, the snake did not go anywhere or did not enter into the rope, and so on. It is only a mistaken notion on the part of the person who is perceiving that, and it can be corrected by a proper understanding of the situation there. In an analogous manner, this should not be construed as a sort of a proof. No proof will be advanced in Vedanta, but certain reasonings, certain illustrations will be provided so that we will be convinced that what the Vedanta is telling must be true. In order to arrive at that such conviction, certain theories are told, and I would not elaborate much on this, since it is actually the inherent Shakti called Maya in Brahman that makes the appearance of this world. Of course, that there exists a Shakti in Brahman itself is not tenable. This is one we have to understand. That is, when the individuals are in ignorance, when they take the world as real, for their sake, it is told that Brahman has a Shakti called Maya, and the whole world will be in a seed form within Brahman, and this Maya Shakti will differentiate that seed into the world form. Now, naturally, this is only a theory or what is called as a method of explanation that is only needed for certain level of spiritual seekers, ultimately to convince themselves that there is nothing other than Brahman here. Now, even when the particular seed form called as Avyakrita or Prakriti of Brahman, when it is differentiated into the world of objects, those world of objects will be only names and forms, and they will continue to have Brahman. They will not be apart from Brahman. Brahman will be their intrinsic swarupa or intrinsic form, but appearance only is there. And a popular illustration for this is the mridghata, that is the clay pot. When there is a clay pot, you have got an entity called pot, which can be used for certain purpose in the world. And there may be other objects made up of clay, but all of them are nothing different from their cause, namely the clay. They are not apart from that. Then what is this pot? We cannot say that pot is clay only, because clay doesn't have any useful purpose for storing water or some other objects. But is it different from clay? No. The shape of the pot, which gives rise to the name pot, that doesn't exist apart from clay. That is why the name and form, that is, the pot has a name, that is pot, and it has a form, that is the rupa. This nama and rupa, they are called as anirvachaniya. What this is, it cannot be told properly. Is it clay? No. Is it apart from clay? No. Then what is it? It exists. The world has to be assumed, it has to be accepted that it is of that kind in relation to Brahman. It's only Brahman who is appearing as this world. Now, the next aspect is we come to Jivas. Now, the Upanishads state tat srishtva tadevanu pravishat. Brahman created the world and he entered into the world. And another Upanishad says, Anena jivenatmananu pravishya nama rupe vyakaravani. Let me enter into this created world objects and then differentiate them into various names and forms that are found in the world. Now, this sort of statement actually cannot have a direct meaning. That is why interpreters like Shankaracharya would be needed to properly explain this. Now, Brahman is one without a second. And when the world has been created, this world is non-different from Brahman. Of course, Brahman can exist without the world. Brahman is different from the world. But the world is not apart from Brahman. That is the idea. Now, since Brahman is everywhere, then what is the meaning of this pravesha? That is entering into the bodies. If we particularly confine ourselves to the human body, it appears to have a physical body and the various sense organs and an inner organ or the subtle body called as antahkarana. This antahkarana is said to be functioning in 4 different ways. One is manas, then buddhi, then chitta, that is the memory aspect, and then ahankara, that is the ego. They are the 4 functions of this antahkarana. Now, this pravesha has been explained in this particular way. This explanation comes by properly observing the behavior of the human beings only. Actually, whatever that Vedanta says about the affairs of this world, in one way or the other, it comes into the experience of humans only. It will not require strange. The explanations may be strange, but the result will be that yes, this must be true. That is how it comes into. That's how the explanations have come. Brahman is said to create the 5 basic elements called Panchabhutas: Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Jala, and Prithvi. And then later, there is a process called Panchikarana. See, these are Vedantic theories. It's only, as I told, it is meant for certain level of seekers for convincing themselves that anything that is appearing here is not apart from Brahman, and Brahman does not have in it these objects. In order to convince themselves only, these theories are advanced. So from Prithvi, that is from the earth, the food comes. And from the food, the human body comes. Prithivya oshadhayaha, oshadibhyonnam, annat purushaha. That is how it is told. That is, the human body is made up of the food only. It is nothing, food is nothing but a product of Prithvi, the earth. It is in earth only the seeds are sown, plants grow, and various kinds of pulses are grown, and people eat. And of course, water, fire, the space, and Vayu. These are all necessary parts of living beings. The human body is a result of this Panchabhutas. Therefore, it is inert, it is Jada. In fact, the Indriyas and the Antahkarana, Buddhi, Manas, Buddhi, intellect, and Ahankara, all these are all inert only, they're Jada. But they appear to have Chaitanya. And because of this, it is told that Brahman has entered the body. In one Upanishad, it is told, Anakhagrebhyo. That is, he has entered into the human body until the tips of the nails. He has entered. But in certain places in the human body, there is a special way in which he has entered. And this special place is the Antahkarana. The Antahkarana is said to be made up of Sattva Guna. This is a prakriya that is used by the earlier philosophers called Sankhyas, that the Prakriti is made up of three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. The Sattva Guna is predominantly the cause of this Antahkarana and the Indriyas. That is why it is very clear or swachha. And it is said that Brahman or consciousness or Atman, he is reflected in the intellect. When he is reflected in the intellect means the intellect will appear to be with Chaitanya. It is just like the face of a human body in a clean mirror. And then when the mirror is of a different kind, or when the mirror shape, or if it is having dust on it, or if it is broken, etc., the face, the reflection that is seen in it appears to be distorted. So here, the face is not affected by the quality of the reflecting surface, that is the mirror. But the reflection, the reflected image is appearing to be affected by that. This is the kind of explanation that is told when we understand the objects in our buddhi. That is his Antahkarana as a whole, that is the ego, the chitta, the manas, and the buddhi. All together, it is called as Antahkarana, or the subtle body. It reflects the Chaitanya, or Brahman, or consciousness, or Atman, who is everywhere. And the image, in fact, when we are understanding an object outside, for example, if we are seeing a particular object, then this buddhi is said to take the form of that object through the eyes. And when the intellect its form is modified into the form of the object, and because of this reflection, the knowledge of that object takes place in the intellect. That is the idea. The same thing has to be carried to the other kinds of inputs that we get from the outside world. that is smelling, hearing, touch, and taste. It is similar, maybe with certain differences, more or less the same kind of explanation will do. For convenience, seeing the objects is taken as the example. It is how the knowledge of an object comes to us in the buddhi. Buddhi takes the form of the object by passing through the eyes, physical eyes, and then the modified buddhi. Now the shape of the buddhi is in the form of the object, and in the Atman, who is everywhere, is reflected in that one. So if the object is different, then the intellect is in the shape of that object. If the object is a sound, then the intellect is set to take the form of the sound. Of course, those who are totally wedded to science will have a lot of questions on these things. But however, it's not the idea here now to convince the scientific idea of perception and the ideas contained in Vedanta. So in Vedanta, whether it is if the form of an object to see, whether it's a sound, an entity, sound to be heard, or an entity, a smell, taste, or touch, all of them result in the deformation of the intellect to the shape of the object that is being perceived. And because of the reflection, which is always because of the pratyagatman, or the consciousness is always there, it gets reflected in that form and the knowledge takes place. Now continuing the same idea, now this human being within the antahkarana, what is happening is there is this ego. This ego is called the ahankara, and this ahankara is jada. And that ahankara will also appear as Chaitanya in the presence of the consciousness that is there. When it behaves as the ego, then it is called as Chidabhasa, that is appearing like consciousness. And in the case of ego, it is called as the I sense. Now, we understand ourselves as I. That is in every action that we do, either doing some particular work or taking inputs through our senses, whatever we do, we say that I saw, I heard. In this I sense is not there in consciousness. But whenever this activity is taking place in the human body, it is due to this Chidabhasa. Chidabhasa of the intellect that gives the knowledge. The Chidabhasa of the ahankara gives the I sense. Therefore, the human beings say, I saw, I did, I decided. That is the kind of thing. So actually, the ahankara ahankara basically is jada. Even when it is reflecting the consciousness, that is the ahankara with the chidabhasa, the reflection of consciousness. Even then, it is inert only, it is jada only. But there is in the human behavior, as we observe, that we mix up this particular ahankara with chidabhasa and the real Atman. See, our Swarupa, we are conscious beings. Our Swarupa intrinsically is consciousness. But in the human behavior, what is happening is there is a mix-up. The mix-up is that the ego with the reflection of consciousness, that is the antahkarana with the I sense, is taken, is we are identifying with that. Instead of identifying, instead of knowing that we are intrinsically, we are consciousness, we are taking ourselves to be the ego with Chidabhasa. That is why this ego with Chidabhasa is called as Aham Pratyayi. Nothing but I sense. Asmat Pratyaya Gochara. That is Atman, consciousness, is available in the Vyavahara, that is in the transactions of the human beings. It is not available as it is, because consciousness, there is no Vyavahara within consciousness. But in the human behavior, there is Vyavahara. There are transactions of many kinds. Now in Vyavahara, the consciousness Atman is appearing as the ego sense. That is the inert ahankara with Chidabhasa. And then whenever an activity takes place like perception, seeing an object and so on, the intellect takes the form and knowledge takes place. And the total result is that in the buddhi, in the intellect, there is this idea to the human beings that I have seen this object, I have heard this object, and so on. Now, extending this, all human affairs can be explained. Of course, this mix-up of the ahankara with Chidabhasa and the consciousness is the primary mix-up, or it is what is called as adhyasa, superimposition. That is, consciousness is there, on consciousness, this ahankara with Chidabhasa has been superimposed. That means now the consciousness is in the background. It is taken as the I sense. That is the idea. Now, similarly, in the human behavior, we tend to take our body as ourselves. That is, we have an identification with our body. Actually, consciousness does not have a body. When we say that I walk or I go to some place, it is actually the body that goes there. Consciousness does not go there. That is in our intrinsic swarupa, that is consciousness, there is no activity. It is always peaceful, one without a second. It is conscious, satyam, jnanam, anantam. And it doesn't change its form. It is always in the same way. But in its presence, Chidabhasa takes place, I sense comes into picture, and then the mix-up is taking place in the human behavior. And one kind of mix-up I told, mix-up of the I sense and the consciousness. The other kind of mix-up that is taking place is between the I sense and all other objects. See, for all practical purposes or for vyavaharik purposes, Atman means this ego sense. That is the aham pratyayi. Ahankara with Chidabhasa is Atman, is ourself for practical purposes in vyavahara. When vyavahara is not there, that is in deep sleep, there is no body, there is no ahankara, nothing, we are consciousness as we are. That is the idea. Now, the second mix-up that I mentioned are adhyasa, our identity. That is, we are identifying ourselves with our, not only the human body, but our indriyas, our manas, our intellect. With all this, we behave as though we have identity with them. See, when we say I walk, the body walks, and therefore I am taking my body as myself. Similarly, manas, when we say my mind is, I am somehow now, I am perturbed. When I say I am perturbed, it's actually the mind that has taken a different shape, and there is Chidabhasa, but that one is taken as myself. Similarly, there is identification with the intellect. That is, I decide. Intellect is the aspect of decision making in the antahkarana. So whenever we say I decide, then that is the function of the intellect, and we have taken it on ourselves, and we are identifying ourselves with that intellect. Therefore, what all aspects of human behavior is there, none of them are present in consciousness, but in the presence of the consciousness, because of the chidabhasa in the antahkarana, and because of this adhyasa, two kinds of adhyasa. One is a superimposition between the ego sense and the consciousness, and on the other hand, between the ego sense and the rest of the human body. The superimposition is nothing but identification. That is why it is called as mutual superimposition. I am the body, body is myself. I am the ego, ego is what I am. That is, consciousness is ego, ego is consciousness. So it works both ways. That is why this superimposition or adhyasa is called as mutual superimposition. Now, the adhyasa with the human body does not end with the human body. It extends beyond. Beyond to whom? Beyond to all other entities like our spouse, our children, our friend, our near and dearest. It can extend to anybody. How? If my spouse is hurt, I feel hurt. Although it is very clear that wife, spouse is an entity totally different from me, even physically a different entity, I have this superimposition because if the spouse is hurt, I am hurt. If the child is hurt, I am hurt. If the child is happy, I am happy. These are called superimposition or identifications beyond the human body, even to the external objects. And the agency of action, the knowership, that is, I know the things, I understand the things, I know the objects. This is what is called as jnatritva, knowership. And I do actions. The body does action. See, the body is acting in the presence of consciousness. See, the Chaitanya to the body to change, to modify is natural. That is the way it is made up. And it is the explanation that is given here is because of the presence of the consciousness, the human body functions the way it is functioning. It is functioning as an agent of action, kartrutva. It is It's an enjoyer. We are an enjoyer. We are bhoktri. We have bhoktritva. We understand things. We know the things. We are jnatris. Therefore, there is jnatritva, knowership. Now, the whole human affairs, what is called as samsara, is explained because of this adhyasa. This adhyasa is actually called avidya or ignorance. Avidya, ignorance. This ignorance on the part of the individual is nothing but the ignorance of his intrinsic nature as consciousness. And that is the reason why there is identification with the body, identification with the eye sense, with the antahkarana, identifications beyond the human body. All these are happening. They are a result, direct consequence of our ignorance, of our intrinsic nature, that is consciousness. That's the way Vedanta explains. Now, getting back to the original point that I was telling, that is Tat Srishtva Tadevanu Pravishat. He created objects and he entered. Now, the entry of the consciousness or Brahman into the bodies is not tenable in the primary sense of entry. But what is the entry? This entry is in the form of Chidabhasa. And not only that, Brahman or our intrinsic nature is available for our understanding in our intellect. That is the position of Vedanta. Taittiriya Upanishad again has a statement, Yo Veda Nihitam Guhayam Parame Vyoman Soshnute Sarvan Kaman Saha. That is the statement. That is, whoever understands this Brahman in the cave of their intellect, then they achieve everything beyond the highest. They achieve the highest. That means that is what is called as realization of our intrinsic nature of consciousness. Now, how one realizes one's nature in the intellect? Again, the intellect has to, in some way, has to take shape of the consciousness, of Brahman. But Brahman has no shape. Therefore, how does it come? Now, Vedanta is saying that when the Vedantic methodology of realizing the intrinsic nature, when that is followed, when that inquiry is made, when it is taken to its culmination point, these are related to the practices or sadhana, what is mainly mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita is karma yoga, dhyana yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, and others. And also inquiry into the nature of Brahman as contained in the Upanishads. When the deliberation takes place and reaches its culmination by a seeker of Brahman, then the truth dawns in him. But this truth dawns is again a Chidabhasa. That is, it is again not the real, because Brahman cannot be realized in the real sense. It's again a sort of a vyavahara or transaction in the ignorant level only. That is, human beings are ignorant because they are in that ignorance of their intrinsic nature. And then when their real nature dawns in their intellect, again it is an abhasa. It's a sort of an appearance. But when that takes place, there is a conviction that is derived, there is a conviction that is available to us in our intellect that all this is Brahman. There is no object other than Brahman. That will be our own experience and our own knowledge with firm conviction. It is not a sort of a bookish knowledge. It is a conviction that is derived, and then the human behavior will be according to the knower of Brahman. It is also told in another Upanishad that Brahmavit Brahmaiva Bhavati. The knower of Brahman becomes Brahman only. That is, he is already Brahman, because the entire world, including the human body, in his inner organ, antahkarana, everything, chidabhasa, everything is not real. It's all mithya. It's all a superimposition on the consciousness, which is the only truth. But in that inert, in that mithya body only, in the intellect, a conviction can arise, and that will be the end of all struggles of human life. That is the end of the sorrow that the human beings suffer for whatever reason. No more drudgery. That will be the highest achievement that human beings can think of. That is called as, it's not called as moksha. Moksha means you have to be one with Brahman only, and when the human body falls, that after the conviction arises in the intellect, the body will continue until the end of what is called as the prarabdha karma of that body. And finally, when the body falls, that is, the empirical human life ends there, then there is no more rebirth of this person. That's the idea of moksha. So, in a sort of a nutshell, I have tried to explain what are the so-called theories about the creation of this world, what Vedanta says about Brahman, who is Ishvara, and of course the word jiva I did not use. In fact, when I am telling that we are mixing up, that there is a mix-up of ego sense and consciousness, and the mix-up of the ego sense and the rest of the body and even outside objects, who is the one who is mixing up? I am the one. That is, whoever says that he is a human being, he is the one who is doing that. And he is not actually, his intrinsic nature is consciousness, but the way in which he is appearing is like this aham pratyayi, or the person, or the antahkarana with the ego sense. That is called the jivas. And of course, there are different human bodies, and the jivas are many, because the antahkarana is different. Each person's antahkarana or intellect is there because of the samskaras of the previous lives. As a prarabdha karma, we inherit our body and the antahkarana. Therefore, the antahkaranas in different human beings are different. And therefore, there are many jivas. Actually, the jiva is only imaginary. We can clearly see that the jiva sense corresponds to the aham pratyayi, and that is a part of the world, and the world is a superimposition of the consciousness. So jiva actually is a kalpita jiva, imaginary one, but however the truth can dawn in his intellect, and then that is called as the liberation from the drudgeries of the human life. I suppose my time is up. Let me end this talk at this point of time.